My name is Drew Falkman. I head up the strategy and product strategy practice at Modus Create. And, my wife is an ER doctor. So, this whole COVID situation is crazy. It's changed the world. It's added such a layer of uncertainty. And we've been downright panicked here at times, my wife and myself. So it really hit home. And, through this process, the way I cope with things is I like to just do things. And so, my wife and I have been involved and active in getting things put together in terms of creating environments for doctors to communicate about COVID, in terms of trying to find PPE for doctors, and just being very vocal. And through that process, I found a lot of inspiration. I found a lot of people who are out there who care, who are doing great things, who have great opinions. And I realized that, it's so important when things are crazy like this and when things are hard, because it really is, everything is different. And we don't know where we're going to land and when we're going to land. And it's just so important to stay inspired and to look for hope. And so I wanted to organize this webinar to do exactly that. And so I invited 3 people that I really respect and admire, that I think are going to have a great perspective on all this. And we're going to be able to take questions from them. But let me introduce them real quick. I'm just going to go in the order that they are in my Zoom here. Jenny Snyder-Ehrman, I'm lucky. She went to university with my wife, and so she's a friend of mine. But she is, for those of you that don't know, she is a writer and a producer. Sutton Street Productions is her company, and she's done a ton of stuff, probably most well-known more recently for Jane the Virgin. She wrote and ran that show. And she has a great perspective, and she's a really generous person. And so I wanted to have her on because I thought she would add a good perspective, both of understanding from a writer's perspective, it's always this trauma, and it's the conflict that really brings the characters to finding their fulfillment. And I think there's a reason humans find that. And so I just wanted to hear her perspective on that, in addition to, some of the stuff she's done around COVID and all that. Jenny, do you want to take a minute to sort of share your perspective on things?
Sure. I thought, it was a really interesting point of view to be asked about of like how we create through this period and what we look for and looking at problems as really the moment of inception of any good creative solution or act. It's like, what can we solve and how can we move past this? For me, it's always so interesting because when you're writing characters, you allow them to think and feel and get into really terrible situations and then process it with the people around them. And then you give them time and space for them to have emotional reactions. And, I love doing that to characters and putting them in harder and harder situations, because that's where drama comes out in TV and film. And what I've realized is that it's easier almost for me to let my characters process things than it is, for myself. And you're often times kinder to your characters and let them go through things and then look at it from all points of view and really try to understand multiple perspectives. That's what I try to do as a writer. I always try to take every character and go through my script from every character's point of view. So they're all the hero of their own story. So nobody is just one thing, and you're not a plot point in someone else's. And it's just made me think about how you let your characters a lot of times take time and process, but we don't allow that for ourselves. It's hard to say that there's any silver lining of something like this, because it's so because people have lost their lives and it's been so horrible economically and physically for so many people. But I think the human spirit is to try to find something that you can look at or that you can hold on to or that you can make a hope to change when things get better. And so that's the moment that we're all in my family, you know, trying to figure out, well, at least we can, you know, we have this time where we're all together. You know, what could we do that we couldn't do when we were out? And all of that's to say that we're able to do that because we're incredibly privileged, and I'm allowed to work from home, and my work hasn't really stopped because I can keep writing during this time. So, you know, we try to really remind ourselves to be compassionate and to remember all the people that are having to go out to work and that are keeping things going for us. Your wife, of course, one of my best friends, Jen, who's an ER doctor, but every single person who's delivering us, you know, the things and allowing us to stay home and feel safe. And we try to remind ourselves what a privilege that is. And then just try to think about, you know, what we would do, would we get all of the freedoms that we took for granted back? How would we change who we are and try to impact things in a better way? And so those are all the things that we're thinking about now. And those are, you know, it's harder to allow yourself space to have breakdowns when you know things are so much worse for other people. But, you know, you always let your characters do that. You always like really privilege their emotional life. And so, you know, trying to understand how that relates to all of us too is something that we've been thinking about a lot in our house.
That's great. That's awesome. And then another panelist I have is John Couch. John is the VP of Design at Hulu, and he wrote a book called The Art of Creative Rebellion. He's been in design and doing really cool stuff for a long time. He was in Wired magazine back when they were really breaking ground with print. He went on to be in Hot Wired, and he's had a great career, worked for CBS, for the Museum of Contemporary Art, for Magento, the e-commerce solution. And he's also an artist and a writer. And I invited him a lot because of the book that he wrote, because it's really about finding inspiration no matter what in life. And he has an interesting perspective that's sort of, he said it, Zen meets Stoicism, which I think is a cool perspective. But anyways, John, do you want to have a few things to say?
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, I kind of coined for myself the idea of Zen Stoicism, where you kind of have to be stoic in your heart and Zen in your thinking. Because I think a lot of this has to do with accepting what is the new reality in many ways. And I think a lot of suffering comes out of the resistance of what is. Most of it is like the idea of like, I don't like change. I don't want to deal with change. And I think your theme for this talk is embracing change. And what's interesting is it reminded me of a couple of things. David Bowie had a really great quote, and I'll just read it really quick. He said, "If you feel safe in the area you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting." And I think what's interesting about Bowie is that he constantly put himself into a state of being uncomfortable, which I think most people who are creative by nature, whether you're a writer or a designer or an artist, we tend to be most comfortable embracing the unknown. But I think for a lot of people, this is a completely destabilizing experience, because it's not just working from home, it's actually dealing with the constant onslaught of bad news and bad media coming towards you, and knowing people who've gotten sick. So when I hear people say, oh, it's just working from home, and if you're lucky to have a job, you're working from home, but the psychological stress of it is something we've never had before. And I have designers on my team who are having to balance with very young children on top of this, and they're having to educate their kids, and both parents are working, and they're trying to figure out, like, how are they going to take care of their children during the summer when school is out while they're trying to work at the same time. So these are all very much unknown. And what I've found is that you can come into contact with something which is disruptive in your life. And the reaction, I think, for universally for human beings is to be in a state of fear, to immediately react with resistance to what's happening. And then that fear turns to anger pretty quickly. And the anger, from my experience, is it goes one of two ways. One, which we all kind of go through variants of this, it goes into a state of despair and depression. Like, this is happening. Why is it happening? I can't stand it. And then you tend to resist it and you get into a spiral. The other reaction to anger is more of a positive, I think, mentality, which is, I'm angry about this and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take that fear and I'm actually going to creatively think about how to make a solution. Because if you don't, what the fear and anger does is actually shuts down creativity pretty quickly. You go into a conservative mentality, and this is what companies do. They start to lay off people, they start to constrict. And some of that is necessary, but I also think it's very necessary to then, once you've stabilized for a second, to think about, where can I expand and what can I do creatively to take advantage of the moment that I'm in? And it takes a minute because, for the first few weeks, you're punch drunk with change, but then eventually you have to settle into a rhythm, I think, with the change. And probably the most interesting example of dealing with fear was a Top Gun pilot I saw speak about 6 years ago. And she was the first female Top Gun pilot. And she talked about the fact that besides having to work her way through the ranks of a very male-dominated environment, that when people are trying to land an aircraft and an aircraft carrier, it's extremely difficult. My father-in-law was a Top Gun pilot as well by coincidence, and he talked about the fact that the ship is moving up and down while the plane is coming in, and you're visually trying to time it to where you are landing at the right moment as the bottom of the ship is going down, and you're timing it and you're hitting it, and there's actually a cable that stops you from moving forward. And she was showing a video, and I can't remember her name, but this Top Gun pilot was showing a video of a man trying to land his plane in the dark, and he missed it. And he went back around and he missed it again. And the problem is he's running out of fuel. And they had a term that they used for these Top Gun pilots, and the key word was bingo. And the reason why they said bingo is they didn't want to say, you're running out of fuel, you're going to have to dump your $100 million plane in the ocean. And so he was in a state of panic and fear. And then what the point was is that the word bingo did is it caused focus to happen. And her basic takeaway, and by the way, the guy landed the plane on the third try, was that focus destroys fear. And the moment you move out of the abstraction of like, oh shit, everything is going on, into what can I do right now, and focus on that, a lot of the noise disappears. So I'll take a breath there, but that's kind of the Zen stoicism I was talking to you about before this meeting.
That's great. And then I also have here Brad Cooper. Brandt, I saw him speak the first time at Mind the Product in San Francisco. I think it was 2016 or 2017. But he really, gets innovation and entrepreneurship in a way that's very action-oriented. So I thought he would be the perfect person to have on to talk about uncertainty and innovation, and talk about how we can experiment with new ideas for our business, for starting a new business, for our careers. So with that, Brandt.
So I love the theme here, and I think what I have to say is just super in line with everyone else. What I do personally, mostly, I come from the startup world, but I now teach large enterprises how to act like entrepreneurs. And I think that many entrepreneurs really belong in the same creative class. It's really about trying to create something new where there isn't a value creation being made for a particular customer or market or whatever. That's what they unleash their creative energy to go and create new value. And I think what happens is that so startup people, entrepreneurs, and innovators inside of large companies are dealing with uncertainty all the time. And what they've learned how to do is to work differently in the face of uncertainty. And so what happens when something like the pandemic hits, I think it's this fear element where we lose sight of what is the uncertainty that we can control and what is the uncertainty that we can't control. And so we can't control how we have the government policies can control somewhat the flow of how the pandemic is going to play out. But ultimately, we don't know when it's going to end. Us as individuals or as companies, we don't know when it's going to end, and we don't know how it's going to play out. And we don't know what the recovery process is going to look like. And so, so that's just the business side of it. But then it also gets into our home lives as well. People working at home. It's somewhat amusing to me that, there's a lot of these senior people that are managing people, and in their house, they have a dedicated office, and their spouse may or may not be working, and they may or may not have people helping them with the house and with kids and all the rest. But a lot of the people that are now working from home, their kitchen table is their home office. Their partner is also trying to work. The kids are out of school. And so these managers that are trying to focus on getting their people to sit in front of the computer for 8 hours and to make sure that they dress appropriately is so beyond what's actually needed, right? And it's really gets back to that fear. It's getting back to what we're comfortable with, which is what I call, the execution mode. And so we go back to what we feel like is known and what works. But the whole point of all of this uncertainty is that the way we used to do it doesn't work anymore. And so we need to unleash this creative spirit that you guys are talking about wherever we face this uncertainty, in the uncertainty that we can control. So what is some of the uncertainty that we can control? Well, we can go and interact with our customers over video to try to learn how they're doing and what are they going through. So we practice empathy. We can come up with our own ideas in order to try to provide value to those customers. And so we test those ideas and test our assumptions. And so we're running experiments. We do this in a disciplined way so that we gather data around what's working and what's not working, so that we're making decisions based as objectively as possible based upon evidence. Then we have to go through we have to learn how to balance our lives. And the balance is, I don't really believe in home life balance. And again, I think the pandemic brings this home. We have to be able to balance our entire lives around the different things that make us functional and make us human. And so I think people can learn how to run their own Kanban boards. And I have a video of that if people are interested, but it's being agile. So I can balance the things in my life. I can balance what I have to get done with work. I can balance maybe some new entrepreneurial activities. I can balance how much time I'm spending with my family. I can balance creativity, the things that I do for creativity. And so there are ways of managing one's time in order to be able to achieve that balance. So that's what I call the equilibrium. And the final part of it is that people need to be focused on ethics. So these are my 5 E's of disruption poetry. And the ethical part of it is very Buddhist. It's leading with compassion and to ensure that we are actually creating value when we're doing the activity that we're doing. And we're creating value for other people. And if we focus on those 5 E's, in my view, then this is a way for us to be able to balance our lives and balance the execution with new learning and with creativity in order to provide value in the world, really no matter what the circumstances are. And I guess I'm hopeful. I'm not certainly convinced, but I'm hopeful that, when we get into recovery mode, that people can maintain some of this, maintain some of that feeling that they had of disruption, that feeling they've had of uncertainty. And if you can hold on to that, then you can then start applying these principles to life when it returns to normal, and lead a more balanced life and be able to be entrepreneurial and creative in addition to your, the existing work and the execution that we all, the chopping wood and carrying water that we all have to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's very true. Balance is such a key, and it is more than work life. Finding time for yourself, finding time for your spouse or your partner, You know, not to mention like having good times with your kids, not just homeschooling them and having them drive you nuts. But this is all great. And thank you everyone for coming. Just a note on sort of format. This is very open. I will sort of field questions for any participants down below. There is a little Q&A section, and you can post any questions you want. Anything that comes up, please feel free to ask. And I'll ask them as we speak. And, you know, for the panelists, you guys are welcome to, you know, interject at any time. If someone reminds you of something you want to say, please just step in. It's not formal at all. So to the balance thing, I think that's such a good point. You know, how is it that we achieve the sort of balance and achieve inspiration if we're doing creative work and whatnot? I mean, Jenny, how do you do that? I know you guys have a lot going on in your household.
Yeah, you know, balance is a tricky thing, and I don't know. I think things go in ebbs and flows, and with creativity, like, you know, some days I'll work all day and night and I'll come out for little bits of things, but I'm mostly working. And then sometimes I'll, you know, it's just, I want to just be with the family, and I don't have a lot I'm going to get done that day. And so I'm not looking for a balance in the days. I'm looking for like a balance over a long period of time, and like just, you know, the scale of life. And, you know, I think, you know, it's tricky with creativity. I feel like, you know, you want to follow your creative inspiration, but also there's, you know, I don't only listen to that. I also, it's a job for me. So I know I have to produce a certain amount. And, you know, I think I just feel so lucky that I can keep sitting in my office and writing. I can't produce things the way that I would, but I can get all of my writing done now. So I really hold on to that. And then, you know, I look at my family and see what they need. And if I can see, you know, I had to adjust because my daughter, she just needed me specifically to be homeschooling with her. And it wasn't great for her to go back and forth with my husband. She needs me, you know, usually until 12 in the morning, focused on, you know, her spelling and her words. And she writes me notes if I'm not doing a great job and lets me know how I'm doing as a teacher and a parent constantly. But I realized she needed that. So that then my workday, you know, bounced back, and from 12:30 or 1 or whatever on, you know, my husband knows to just sort of keep everyone contained and out of my office for as much as they can. But, you know, I can work late at night. I can work in the morning. For me, work is also, it's so my passion. So it's almost like, you know, I could be someone that just disappears in my office and doesn't come out for days and days and is really happy and buzzing with the creative process. So I have to kind of definitely take time and make sure that, you know, both spheres are operating well. And like I said, I look for balance in a long arc, not on the day-to-day, because every day is different. And I let this sort of the day and the feeling and the multiple moods that surround me, not only my own, kind of help dictate what the family needs and what my work life needs every day.
Yeah, that's great. I like that idea of balance. Is that you don't have to find it in the same day, because there are, I mean, you know, even for those of us that have like day-to-day work, there are days when we're productive and days when we're not. And so even if we're working 9 to 5, we have to be there to respond sometimes. The balance just isn't there when we're doing things this way. Interesting. So John, real quick, how do you think, or how have you found, I know you have an interesting schedule. How have you found that creative thinking has helped you work through this sort of COVID and the related stresses?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty regimented in how I approach my time for creativity, not because I want to be, but just because it kind of helps me. The thing I know is, you know, I'm lucky. I work in a creative, you know, environment as a designer, and I'm very lucky to work with about 40 other designers and researchers to develop a product. And even though that's my day job, and then I have my other job, which is spending time with my family, what's interesting is I think that there's an emphasis, whatever job you have, that you're either doing something which makes money, which gives, societal kind of like value. People go, oh, good, you're working, you're making it, you're doing a job. And if you're not doing your job, then you're spending time with your family, which is also socially endorsed. But what I find is that a lot of people, even if they're creative, almost feel guilty if they are taking care of their creative health in addition to their mental and physical health. And by that I mean, I encourage my design team to do, ceramics, to write poetry, to write a screenplay, to do yoga, or anything beyond what they do during the day, because I think it'll actually add to their creativity to do something which is creatively different from what they do for their day job. But whether you're a designer, a writer, or an accountant, I think it's a good thing to do, is to have something which you're not giving away. Because in my case, I give it away all day long, to the job. And then I give it away to my wife and daughter, which is good. You should do that. You should give it away to your job and to your family. But then what I have found is I often feel like I don't have anything for me, which is unmitigatedly myself. And so what I had to learn how to do is get up at 5:30 in the morning in order to write for an hour and a half, in order to essentially have a direct connection with the creative source, so to speak, not to be too woo-woo, but like to kind of connect to that. And then I feel like I've almost done my workout. So I usually get up early, I meditate for 30 minutes or so, 20 to 30 minutes. And then I write for an hour and a half. And then I spend time with the family for breakfast, at which point in a normal world, I would be driving to Santa Monica to go to work. That's no longer happening. And then I spend the day at work. And then at night, after I spend time with the family, then I paint physical analog paintings from around 9 to about 11 o'clock, midnight. And for me personally, that allows me to, again, with the writing, I'm connecting directly to creativity without the thinking of like, I've got to make this into a monetizable thing. And I'm doing the same thing with the painting. I'm not looking at it from a perspective, I've got to sell a painting. I'm just having to get it out. And the painting and the book are almost like an artifact or a memory of the actual process of being creatively engaged. It's almost like when I'm done painting, I'm like, oh, there's a thing I didn't mean. But if I start thinking about like, I've got to then sell that painting, it'll change the energy with which I am creating. And then it becomes like a job. And I already have a job. So does that make sense? And so there's a kind of a division of time between the work that I'm doing creatively as a profession and then the work that I'm doing, I guess in a sense, as an amateur, in the best sense of the word, in order to stay creatively updated. And the problem has been with this COVID situation is that my finely tuned schedule that I just mentioned was blown out the door almost within the first week of it happening. I thought I was super disciplined, and suddenly I realized I was spending 7-8 hours in front of Zoom. I wasn't working out. I was eating too much. I was getting weirdly depressed at points and weirdly elated at other points. And I'm like, what's going on? Like it was this weird kind of, within an hour, my finely tuned schedule was completely blown away. And then over the course of a couple of weeks, I started getting back into it. But it wouldn't surprise me if other people feel completely off, even the most disciplined of us, that you are dealing with something which is not just the unknown, but there's some other larger psychological thing happening there. We are probably going to look back on with 2020 vision at 2020 and go, oh, that's what was happening. But right now, we're in the midst of the swirl. So we're not entirely sure, because with the political turmoil that's going on, the climate, that's going on, it's just a lot to take in. So if you can do one thing a day, the takeaway, I think, one thing that's just yours for an hour, let's say, and it could be, you don't have to write the great American novel. You don't have to write the great screenplay or be a neuroscientist, but do something that you actively enjoy, that's specifically just for you and not for someone else. And it feels initially kind of like you're being selfish. Like if you want to learn how to play a Stratocaster guitar, do it, but do it without feeling like it should be like something you shouldn't do as an adult, that you should be doing something proper as an adult that makes money, or if you're not doing that, you should be spending time with your children or with your family. And I think it's healthy actually, because then it gives you a sense of your centeredness. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with the whole process.
I can relate for sure. I'm more on the struggling side. I have not found the balance yet, for sure. So here's a question. I think this is a good one for you, Brandt. So the question is, as companies embrace change, they're also forced to make decisions in very uncertain conditions. What thoughts do you have on decision-making and how to select a path in times of uncertainty?
Yeah, so a lot of companies are reshuffling their priorities, or they have reshuffled their priorities. It may come as no surprise that I have sort of a tool for leaders to use to help them reshuffle those priorities, and it's based upon uncertainty. And so really, I try to get executives to imagine, what are all the initiatives that they're currently working on, and what are the ones that they could be working on. And you rank them on a 2x2. It's a very simple, you just draw this, but vertically it's, what we consider to be high, or what we hope to be high impact versus lower impact. And then horizontally, it's how confident are we that we understand the needs of the stakeholder? Do we understand the circumstances? Do we believe that we have the capabilities? And that's your horizontal axis. So in the upper right quadrant, you have high impact and high confidence. And companies, people already know how to execute in those. They know how to do. So high priority, go and assign those to the right people and the people that love certainty and know how to get those things done. But there's these up in the upper left quadrant, which is high impact and lower confidence. And that's the lower confidence is bred by uncertainty. And so there, I want to use some of this entrepreneurial thinking, those 5 E's that I was talking about, in order to move those lower confidence, uncertain items over into the high confidence. And most people, executives in particular, don't think about those two. And so what they're doing is that they're assigning these high impact, low confidence. They haven't thought about it that way, but high impact, low known, high uncertainty. They're assigning those in the same way as they assign the high impact, high confidence. And what that creates is, again, just more fear and angst, because people are told to go off and execute on things that, you don't have the knowledge to do, or you don't have the understanding of the customer, or you don't understand the problems that deeply, or you don't have the right capabilities. And so that causes just more stress and more fear. And so I think just the simple concept of trying to bifurcate between what is known, what are we highly confident in, and what is unknown will help people reprioritize the initiatives that they're working on.
That's great. That's great.
Can I weigh in real quickly on the balance one? I want to show this to people. So I don't know if you can see this. This is my Kanban board. And you can go to personalkanban.com, which is Tony De Maria and Jim Benson. And it's just, I absolutely love it. And I'm actually not that disciplined of a person. I actually struggle with getting things done that I almost need stress in order for me to get moving on stuff. But it had these concepts of, here's all the things that I could be working on. And then you have these swim lanes, and the swim lanes are filled with things that aren't typical projects. So I have a book on there, and I have time with my family, and I have personal wellness, and I have some of these other projects that have their own dedicated things I could be working on. And you're only allowed to have 3 work in progress Post-it notes. So you have a column for this work in progress. And I can choose from those swim lanes at any time of any day. So I'm working on a couple of things right now that I absolutely hate. It's like we're supposed to be working on passion projects, but I'm working on a contract negotiation with a huge European medical device company, and I hate it. And I'm in the final dregs of a book, and that last 1% of getting the book done, and it's just horrible. It's rereading words I've read a million times, and I absolutely hate it. So I will literally put a Post-it note on there, work in progress, editing book. And 5 minutes later, I'll go up there and I'll put a Post-it note that says, learning new song on guitar. And I'm wandering around my house, just playing my guitar. And this is it's not an hour, but it's like 5 minutes of creativity that just sort of gets me through those tasks that I just loathe doing. And I'll just go back and forth and I'm wandering around. And so that sort of, it's probably the wrong way to do it. It certainly doesn't work for everybody, but the concept of being able to choose from those swim lanes at any point in the day, I think, is how people can learn how to balance doing things that keep them creative or keep the joy while also doing those things that just you don't want to do. I wish I was more disciplined, that I would spend an hour every day doing something like that. I don't, but there'll come a week where I spend 2 or 3 days doing that stuff instead of the hour a day. And I think the discipline of doing an hour a day is great. But I also see Jenny's point of view that it's like, I got to look at it from over this longer period is when the balance is achieved, not on a daily basis. So sorry, I wanted to throw that 2 cents in there because I think I struggle with that balance, even though I talk about it.
Well, I like too that there's sort of a theme that's come up is like forgiving yourself and giving yourself permission to break away from, doing the things that you have to do, right? Giving yourself permission to take that time for yourself and not feel guilty about it and not feel like you're taking it away from your work or your kids, and giving yourself permission to do that. And I think, I know I can certainly be a lot nicer to myself.
Well,
and it's good to be reminded of that.
I would love to get other people's perspective on this, but I asked the question of this colleague of mine the other day, how much time are people actually spending working when they're sitting in their cube at their office for 8 hours? Like, how many hours are actually productive? Yeah. I think we're putting more pressure on people now at home to be more productive than they were at work. Everybody pretends that we're trying to recreate the work progress, at least in these big companies. And it's not true. And so we manage by trying to force people to sit in front of their video for 8 hours, their computer, when in reality, they're working 4 hours maximum when they're sitting in the cube. So I think our perspective gets warped. And I actually think it goes back to John talking about the fear, and we're trying to latch on to things that we know, and execution mode and buckling down. And it's really because we don't know how to deal with the uncertainty, even the uncertainty that we can control.
Yeah. If I could add on that, I think Brandt's right. I mean, there's a lot of theater in corporate environments, the appearance of being busy and therefore being productive. And there's a lot of people in most companies in my professional career who've made a career of showing up in boardrooms and simply saying something that sounds important and then walking out, and then their job is done, drop the mic. And, in terms of actually making something, the good thing about the particular line of business I'm in is there's a thing that has to come out of it, an actual thing that you have to produce, which makes it a little bit more quantifiable. And consequently, even before COVID-19, I had a policy for my team of working home 1 day a week if they wanted to do it. Ironically, they didn't. Most of them didn't. They liked the community of collaborating in person. It's probably like the writer's room for Jenny, or, whatever. Like you can write on your own, and designing, like writing is a very isolated experience, but you go in and you spitball with each other and you hit ideas, and then you break down the design or the story, and then you can go off and do your thing. And there's something weirdly needed about human beings being in a physical space together to have that, which is lacking from Zoom in a lot of ways. And I've actually enforced a noon to 1 o'clock no meeting policy during this period, so that people have to go they're encouraged to go have lunch, and they're encouraged to go outside and take a break. And I would agree with Brandt that I think that if I get 4 hours of actual work out of a human being in a day, that's a lot. And I think a lot of the rest of the time, if you think about it, is spent driving in LA traffic in our case, to get from point A to point B, and having a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails in between the actual work. And so if you take out all the emails and the conversations, and the actual work might even be less than 4 hours of actual concentrated work.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Jenny, what's your experience? You don't have a writer's room. What's it like not working with a writer's room? And then you're also you can't really film anything right now. So your day must be significantly different than it was.
It is. I was coming into, I had come out of a lot of production, so I was coming into a development cycle. So this is, pretty similar to what I'd be doing. I've always needed a combination of being in an office and writing from home. Like, I like writing by myself. I like, being in my own cocoon. But as I always put my office at walking distance from my house, since I've been lucky enough to choose where my office could be. And I like the walk to work, community, and then going home to process everything. So, I'll do all the business of work with everybody, and also tend to because when you're a showrunner, you're doing all the creative work, but you're doing all the managerial work too. Which you don't quite, that's a big learning curve when you go from being a writer by yourself to, oh my gosh, I have, 300 people that I've got to manage and be able to give feedback to in a way that inspires them, but also keeps it on the track that I want it to be on, and just all of that management. So that would be the stuff that I would do at the office, talking to people, meeting with people, taking phone calls, trying to problem solve, making decisions all day long. And then home is where I come to do my writing, execute what I want to do, and just the walk to and from that office would be my de-escalation. Only 10 minutes, but a chance to get into a more internal mode. So, the difference now is I still have I'll come out and I'll do a few Zoom meetings and connect with people and develop, we're developing things right now. So it's a lot of talking, but then I just have my own cocoon space that I really protect. And, I've always been my cycles are kind of the day and night. If I need to take a nap, I take a nap. When I get up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, I don't lie in bed. I get up and write until I'm done and tired again. I don't like to waste time, thinking about what I should be doing. I just kind of do it when I'm able to, and when I need a nap. Naps are real important to me. But so is that 3 o'clock where I wake up and I'm I can't sleep. I got to go downstairs and write, because that's going to get the stuff out of my mind. And that's, I don't thrive in anxiety. I thrive on checking things off the list. So a lot of my life is built around getting out ahead of things so that I'm not anxious, and so that I'm not transferring my own anxiety to the people that I work with. And, that's a big part of the balance I've learned. So, the difference now is that I'm home and I don't have those moments of transition, or when I used to smoke, it would be okay, I'm having a cigarette and now lunch is done. You don't have those things anymore, those sort of signifiers of
liminal states. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're just in your house. So I can, I'm going from here, but now I'm going to start again. So it's just sort of being okay with that flow a little bit without the sort of specific breaks that I use to mark my day has been challenging. I'm more challenged by the idea, because it was very easy when they said, don't leave the house. That's very easy for me to follow. Okay, I got my family here. No one's coming in, no one's coming out. I'm finding it more stressful thinking about emerging again and what that's going to be, and how sets are going to be safe, and the amount of, personal responsibility that I have to the people that I work with, the responsibility of my kids. When do I let them have a socially distanced play date? Whereas I'm most comfortable just being in the cocoon, right? And not letting things in or out. So those are the kind of stresses that I'm trying to give myself time to make decisions on. I'm getting comfortable with new ideas before I make a next move, which is a sort of different pace for me, because when you're running a show, what you get comfortable with and what you have to trust is your gut and your ability to make quick decisions all the time and stick by them and keep things moving. So now it's sort of like, okay, I have to sit back a little bit and I can't make that decision right now. I'm not ready to make it. I'm letting it start to percolate, the thing, and, understanding, the things that like other people, families might be comfortable with, I might be different. And what does that feel like? And how much is given into my own sort of personal anxieties and things that I should overcome, and how much is okay to listen to. So those are all the bigger sort of things that I'm dealing with now in this period. And for me, the writing is like, okay, well, that remains the same. I can sit and write and produce things. And, that's where I get a lot of my sense of self and my worth. And I love reading after I've written something and trying to make it better. And, so that's like my safety cocoon is my work. And then it's everything else that's kind of a little bit more scary to me at this moment, and that I'm trying to mindfully move towards without forcing any decisions that I'm not ready to make yet.
Interesting. And when are you supposed to go to production? When do these things have to?
I think we're not really, we're waiting for these guidelines to come out. Which have been, everyone's collaborating together, studios and unions and guilds, and so I think that we're going to get a snapshot. There's been talk of, the end of summer. There's been talk of July. There's been talk of August. There's been talk of September. I think there's just so much unknown, and like it's got to be a personal decision of how safe do you feel. Everybody's going to be making their own decisions. I feel worried for people who can't make the decisions based on like, I feel like I have my privileges that I can say, I'm not comfortable yet. I'm just going to stay in here and keep writing. But like, I can do that job from here. So, I just don't know quite what it's going to look like. I know, we talked a lot about smaller crews and different pods of people moving in and out. And, I feel like there's got to be some sort of effective, rapid daily test, for people to be comfortable. I think we're going to be adding 2 hours to our day in terms of, checking in, safety precautions. Sets are like, it's a petri dish. You are just like all over each other. Everyone's moving things. Everybody has one thing they can touch, but so to imagine that how slow that's going to have to be in order to make it safe and make people feel comfortable. I think it's just a lot of unknown, and I'm really like looking forward to getting information, and then also just trying to understand what that means practically. And I don't think anybody really knows. I think there's a lot of guidelines and things that are going to come out, but I don't think anybody really knows how that's going to practically work.
Yeah.
The thing that I can focus on, again, like I can't manage everything there. What I can manage is making sure that like I have all my scripts done, which you never get a chance to do in production. Normally you're writing as you're producing, as you're editing, and it's like 3 jobs in one, and you're exhausted. Well, now I have this amazing period of time where I can get ahead so that when I go into production, I can plan it better. I can be more efficient. I can block and shoot, different things at the same time because I know what it is and I can be mindful about those. So I'm trying to just like focus on, wow, what an amazing opportunity to get ahead on scripts. Because normally in day-to-day life, you're like, if only I had more time, if only I had more scripts. So I'm trying to like shore up that because that's what I can focus on. And that's what I can achieve now. And then when the rest of it opens up, I'll be a sort of like better armed to deal with all of the challenges that present themselves in production.
Yep. It's really interesting. It seems to me like it brings up 2 themes that I think of. One of like we have, because like you said, we're waiting for these guidelines, right? And so that says 2 things, right? It's totally out of our control. We're like waiting for these things. And then the other thing is that you said is, well, we're going to have to make our own decisions. So there's like this element of trust as well. Like, do I trust the people that are saying, go out and, do things now to help the economy, or because we have to film this thing and get it in production? And that's tough, dealing with that control when you're out of control and, not knowing who to trust.
Yeah, that's why, like, for me, what helps me always is just focusing on the things that I can control and making sure that, like, my part is, like, build that house with a firm foundation and all the things that I can do, and I've decorated and I've gotten it ready, and then, like, have to wait for the next thing and be more flexible there. But if I can, like, take care of what I need to take care of, that helps me at least feel a sense of control in what is obviously a situation where we have no control.
Yeah. Sort of on that line, John, do you think, when you don't have control and you have to trust others, and it really comes back to like the stuff that you write about, just being in the moment and being in the now. And, do you have any thoughts on how we could deal with that?
Yeah, I'm going to get a little philosophical for a second. On a macroscopic scale, the very fact that we're alive is kind of an incredibly unlikely thing. And I'm reading this book called Until the End of Time by Brian Greene, and he's a physicist who talks about the fact that he thinks in cosmic time, and you think about the fact that human beings are these really strange things, that we are in this moment of having consciousness on this piece of rock hurtling through an infinite amount of space into an infinite universe. And we have both the ability to have, the sonnets of Shakespeare and, Einsteinian thinking about the ends of the cosmos. And at the same time, we're stuck in these slowly decaying physical bodies all at the same time. And so the contradiction is that as human beings, we're in this constant state of existential angst about the deferment of thinking about death, and that's, the origins of being busy and accomplishing and trying to make art, and religion as a way of essentially kind of deferring the inevitable. And I think that's what's interesting about the COVID-19 thing, is that it brought mortality to the fore in a way that was incredibly uncomfortable for most people. For a long time, the idea of death has been kind of an abstraction. And then you start to hear about it, and it started to happen in China, then in Europe, and in New York, and it started closing in. And suddenly you knew somebody who got sick, or someone who died. And then what has led to, I think, this moment of angst and lack of control is the fact that it goes down to the basic issue that we are here for a brief moment, and that we are only in control of the exact moment that we're in right now, because everything that's happened before is now a memory, and everything that's going to happen from this point forward is speculation. So it's really, if it's taken the right way, I think a really galvanizing way of taking you out of anxiety and into being completely in this moment, because this is truly being in life. And when you do that, natural states of gratitude start to happen, appreciation of what you do have versus what you lack, appreciation of the people around you suddenly comes to the fore. And then you take away this sense of like always wanting what you don't have, which, going back to kind of Brandt's point about Buddhism, the idea is that life, it can be painful, but suffering is optional. And the point, for example, I think of art, is to alleviate the pain of suffering, where the issue of suffering, to some extent, it's to enlighten, it's to distract, it's to give insight, it's all those things. But what it does is it allows you to go deeper into how you think about the world in general. And so the book that I wrote, I had zero, and I still have zero interest in actually making money off of it. It was more of a gift. The idea was I wanted to deploy something that had some, hopefully, information in it that would help guide other people during this brief moment that we exist out into the, and out into the world. And then if it could land with people the right way, then I've done my job of helping to alleviate some suffering for people. It sounds very highfalutin, but really that was the actual underlying reason, because I think that what has always plagued me since I was a kid was the things that are being brought to the fore by the pandemic, which is, what is meaning? What is the meaning of my existence? And what happens ultimately when you do lose consciousness, or do lose consciousness, when you pass beyond this physical entity that we're in? And so for me personally, it's really been an interesting experiment to kind of like explore those ideas further during this period. in addition to worrying about paying for rent, you know, for the, not the rent, but paying the mortgage and paying for groceries and healthcare and all the things that plague us on a daily basis, I think there's a way to kind of up level for a moment during this period and think about your life macroscopically.
Yep, that's
So,
great. And on that note, we have a couple minutes left, and that's a perfect thing to segue into maybe Brandt and Jenny, if you can give real quickly, like what is the up level that you hope or you think you might have gained from this quarantine, or what do you think you could have learned from this that you want to take away and not forget about when life gets back to normal? Brandt, do you want to start? 1 minute or less.
Yeah, okay. I think it sounds like we've the universe has sent us all into a timeout, and so hopefully we've all taken advantage of it. So I think that the biggest thing I'm going to miss when the quarantine is over is really the amount of focus that this brought to me. And I think that the amount of focus that it's brought to me allows me to think about some of those things that John is talking about and the balance and all of that. And you know, I'm hopeful, I guess, that I'm going to be able to retain that, but though I also know that I'm going to ebb and flow out of it. But to me, it's more just like a reminder. I think it's to try to, when I get back into traveling and all these other things, is to actually to stay in the moment and to lead with compassion and to create value in the world. And I have my own flow that I get into when I'm doing that, and it is the most rewarding part of my life and what makes me, you know, happy. And I think that everybody has that, and it doesn't have to be highfalutin, or it could be highfalutin. It kind of doesn't matter. It's what brings people joy when leading from compassion. So it's not as simple as doing what you're passionate about. It's sort of this outward, it's this outward energy that we're bringing that actually makes us feel good inside, I think. And I'm a little bit envious of the super creative people that can express all that in their art. But the rest of us have all sorts of things that we can do along that front as well. So that's over a minute, but I'm done.
All right. Jenny?
You know, I think for us, the positive has been the reconnection with the family and really understanding. I understand the way my kids learn in a way that I didn't understand before, that I'm like so involved in their schoolwork, which has been really, I just think that this will be a year and connections and understanding of each other that we didn't all have before. And then I hope we leave with that, you know, just much more gratitude for all the things that we didn't understand were so important to us, like a play date, like being able to have dinner with friends, like just not being anxious. Like that's the thing I want to lose, is when I see another person coming towards me, I'm not anxious anymore. Because now I feel like, oh my God, this is this unknowable thing. And it makes me think of, you know, just how freely we moved before. And I want that sense back, where people feel like they could be potential friends and not threats.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, much gratitude. Thank you, Jenny, John, and Brandt, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It's been inspirational for me to hear all this stuff and to think like this for at least an hour today. And you guys had great insights. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
thanks,
Yep.
Drew.